Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
40 years of marriage, and she chose betrayal for Italian shoes and fake love. After 40 years of marriage, I thought I knew my wife. Turns out she was sleeping with my best friend and plotting to steal everything I'd built, including the farm my hands had bled for. But when the truth came out, I didn't just walk away. I took them both down, in front of 400 people. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a story of revenge, redemption, and the kind of peace that only grows from scorched earth. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. The sun hadn't quite broken over the Sandia Mountains when the old man's boots crunched through the sandy soil between his chile plants. Each step was measured. Deliberate, the walk of someone who'd learned that good things came to those who paid attention to details. His weathered hands, spotted with age but steady as granite, reached out to test the moisture of the earth. "Perfect," he murmured, satisfaction warming his chest like the first sip of morning coffee. The hatched chiles were coming along beautifully this year. Best crop in a decade, maybe more. At 68, he'd found his rhythm. Aerospace engineering had given him precision, but this land had taught him patience. Every morning started the same way, up before dawn, out to the fields while Sophia slept, back in time to make her favorite green chile eggs. 40 years of marriage had its routines, and he treasured every one of them. The adobe house glowed pink in the rising light as he made his way back. Through the kitchen window, he could see Sophia's collection of southwestern landscapes, each one carefully lit with the track lighting he'd installed last spring. She'd protested the expense, but he'd insisted. "Your art deserves to be seen properly," he'd told her, and the way her face had lit up made every penny worth it. Inside, the coffee maker gurgled to life, programmable, because engineers solved problems before they became problems. He pulled out the cast iron skillet, cracked 4 eggs, and reached for the jar of roasted green chile he'd put up last fall. "Morning, handsome." Sophia's voice still made him smile after all these years. She padded into the kitchen in her silk robe, another anniversary gift, her silver hair catching the light. At 62, she moved with the grace of a gallery owner who knew how to command a room. "Morning yourself? Hungry?" "Starving." She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, and he felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. "You smell like the fields. Is that your way of telling me I need a shower?" "It's my way of telling you I love that you still get up at ungodly hours to tend those plants." She kissed his shoulder blade through his work shirt. "Even if it means I wake up alone." He plated the eggs, added fresh tortillas he'd picked up from Rosa's yesterday, and they sat at the breakfast nook overlooking the valley. This was his favorite time of day, just them, the mountains, and the quiet promise of hours stretching ahead. "Don't forget we have dinner with Craig and Patricia tonight," Sophia said, scrolling through her phone. 7:30 at El Pinto. Wouldn't miss it. Craig had been their friend for 20 years, ever since he'd developed the shopping center where Sophia's first gallery space had been. Patricia, Sophia's sister, had moved to Albuquerque 5 years ago after her divorce, and the 4 of them had fallen into an easy rhythm of weekly dinners. "I might be a little late," Sophia added, not looking up from her screen. "There's an artist flying in from Taos. Incredible work, these massive steel sculptures that capture the light, if I can get exclusive representation. Take your time. You know Craig'll just spend the first hour talking about his latest development anyway." She laughed, that throaty sound he'd fallen in love with at a faculty party in 1975. "True. Did you know he's looking at that plot of land near your cousin's place? Wants to put in luxury condos. Man never met a piece of desert he didn't want to pave over. Be nice. He's been good to us." That was true enough. Craig had gotten Sophia prime retail space at below-market rates, had steered wealthy clients her way. The man had an eye for opportunity and the charm to capitalize on it. Salt and pepper beard, always perfectly trimmed. Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Not the kind of person he would have naturally gravitated toward. But Sophia adored him. "I'll be nice," he promised. "I'm always nice." "You're always polite. There's a difference." She stood, kissed the top of his head. "I've got to run. The framers are delivering the new collection at 9. Drive safe. Always do. But she didn't make it home for lunch like she'd promised. A text came around 1. Running behind. Artist is amazing but needy. Rain check on lunch? He ate his sandwich alone, watching the monsoon clouds build over the mountains. The summer rains were late this year. Everything felt a little off-kilter, though he couldn't put his finger on why. That evening he showered early, put on the blue button-down Sophia had bought him for Christmas. She liked him in blue, said it brought out his eyes. He was ready by 6:30, sitting in his leather chair with a book about soil management when her text came through. Still at gallery. Take your truck and I'll meet you there? So sorry. He arrived at El Pinto to find Craig already 3 fingers into a scotch, regaling Patricia with some story about a permit dispute. Patricia looked tired. She'd been pulling extra shifts at Presbyterian since the hospital had cut staff. There he is, Craig boomed, standing to shake hands with unnecessary vigor. Where's your better half? Running late. Artist emergency. That woman works too hard. Craig signaled the waiter. What are you drinking? Just a Modelo. Come on, live a little. They've got a 20-year Macallan. Beer's fine. Patricia patted the seat beside her. How are the chilies coming? Better than expected. Might actually turn a profit this year. From your lips to God's ears, Craig said, raising his glass. Though I still say you're sitting on a gold mine with that land. You ever want to cash out? It's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not everything. An awkward beat passed. Patricia jumped in. Sophia showed me the new Gorman pieces. They're stunning. She's got a good eye, he agreed, though he hadn't actually seen them yet. Sophia used to bring him to every new installation, getting his opinion even though he always deferred to her expertise. Lately, she'd been too busy. She swept in 40 minutes late, breathless and apologetic, kissing everyone's cheeks and launching into a story about the artist's demands. She looked beautiful, she always did, but there was something brittle in her laugh, something performative in the way she touched his shoulder. You're not upset, are you? She asked after they'd ordered. Why would I be upset? I know I've been distracted lately. The gallery's just been... Hey. He covered her hand with his. You're building something important. I get it. She squeezed back, but her eyes were already drifting to her phone, buzzing insistently in her purse. The conversation flowed around him Craig's latest project, Patricia's work drama, Sophia's plans for a Southwest contemporary showcase. He participated when needed but found himself studying his wife's face. When had those lines around her mouth appeared? When had her smile stopped reaching her eyes? Earth to spaceman, Craig said, snapping his fingers. You still with us? Sorry, long day in the fields. I don't know how you do it, man. All that manual labor at your age. Keeps me young. Young. Craig snorted. We're none of us young anymore. Speak for yourself, Sophia said, but there was an edge to it. The check came. Craig grabbed it with typical flourish. My treat. Least I can do for my favorite farmers. In the parking lot, Sophia kissed him goodbye quick, distracted. I'll be home in an hour. Just need to stop by the gallery and check the new lighting. It's 9 o'clock. I know, but if it's not right for the morning. She was already walking toward her Lexus. Don't wait up. He drove home through empty streets, the summer heat finally breaking. In the kitchen, he found himself staring at her empty coffee cup from the morning, lipstick still visible on the rim. When had she started wearing lipstick to breakfast? The house felt too quiet. He walked through rooms they'd carefully curated over 4 decades, her paintings, his books, photographs from trips to Canyon to Celli and Bandelier. A life well lived, he'd always thought. In the garage, organizing tools he'd already organized last week, his hand brushed something unfamiliar in Sophia's car. He hadn't meant to look, had just been retrieving his reading glasses from where he'd left them that morning. But there it was in the glove compartment, a silver cuff bracelet, Navajo design, with a price tag that made him whistle. $800. Sophia didn't wear silver. It washes me out, she'd always said. He held the bracelet up to the fluorescent light, watching it catch and throw shadows. There would be an explanation. There always was. A gift for someone. inventory from the gallery that she'd forgotten about. But standing there in the garage, surrounded by the accumulated evidence of a shared life, he felt something shift in his chest, like tectonic plates grinding against each other, too deep to see but impossible to ignore. Inside, he made chamomile tea and sat in his chair. Sophia came home at 11:30, moving quietly through the dark house. "You're still up," she said, sounding surprised. "Couldn't sleep." "The new lighting looks incredible. You should come see tomorrow." "I will." She kissed his forehead when had they stopped kissing properly, and headed for the bedroom. "Coming?" "In a minute." He sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of her getting ready for bed. Water running, drawers opening and closing, the bed creaking as she settled in. All familiar. All suddenly foreign. The bracelet sat heavy in his pocket. Tomorrow, he'd ask her about it. Tomorrow, she'd have a perfectly reasonable explanation. Tomorrow, everything would make sense again. But tonight, in the quiet of their adobe home, with 40 years of memories watching from the walls, he felt the first hairline crack spread across the foundation of everything he thought he knew. The morning after finding the bracelet, he woke with the kind of clarity that comes from a night of shallow sleep and deep thinking. Sophia had already left a note on the kitchen counter about an early meeting with a collector from Dallas. Her coffee cup sat in the sink, unwashed, another small change in the rhythm of their life. He made his rounds through the Chile fields, but his mind wasn't on irrigation schedules or pest management. That silver bracelet sat on his workbench in the garage, catching the light like an accusation. $800 for someone else. "You look like hell." Evelyn's voice cut through his brooding. His oldest friend stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, fixing him with the same non-nonsense stare that had terrorized middle schoolers for 30 years. "Thanks. You always know just what to say. That's why you keep me around." She picked her way through the rows, careful not to disturb the plants. At 65, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never met a problem she couldn't solve. "Sophia mentioned you seemed distracted at dinner last night." "She called you?" "Patricia called me. Apparently you spent half the meal staring into space." He pulled off his work gloves, buying time. Evelyn had been there the night he'd met Sophia. She'd been his best man at the wedding best person, she'd insisted, even in 1975. If anyone would understand. "Can I ask you something? Hypothetically." "There's no such thing as hypothetical at our age." She leaned against his truck. "Spit it out." He told her about the bracelet, the late nights, the new phone with the fingerprint lock, the distance that had crept between them like morning glory through a garden pretty enough at first glance, but choking everything underneath. Evelyn listened without interrupting, which was unlike her. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "What does your gut tell you?" "That I'm being paranoid. That 40 years means something. That there's an explanation. And that something's wrong." She nodded slowly. "You know what I always told my students? When your gut talks, listen. When your brain argues, gather evidence. I'm not going to spy on my wife. Then don't. But pay attention. That's all. Just pay attention." That night, Sophia came home on time, bearing takeout from their favorite Thai place and a bottle of wine that cost more than their usual. She was attentive, affectionate even, asking about the farm and actually listening to the answers. When she excused herself to answer a call, he heard her tell whoever it was that she couldn't talk right now. "Who was that?" he asked when she returned. "Just a client. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." She refilled his wine glass. "I was thinking maybe we could take a long weekend, drive up to Ghost Ranch like we used to. I'd like that." "Good. I'll clear my calendar." But she didn't. Over the next 2 weeks, the plans kept shifting. First, a major collector was coming to town. Then there was a problem with a shipment. Then Craig needed her help with something he wouldn't specify. Craig. The name had started to create a small knot in his stomach. How many of Sophia's late nights coincided with Craig's real estate meetings? How many of her gallery emergencies happened when Patricia was working night shifts? He began to notice things he'd previously ignored. The way Sophia's phone was always face down now. The credit card charges at restaurants he'd never heard of always during times when he'd been at the farm or the coop meetings. The new clothes that appeared in her closet. When had she started shopping at boutiques instead of her usual spots? "I need your help," he told Evelyn over coffee at their usual diner. The morning crowd provided enough noise for privacy. "Finally, I was wondering when you'd ask." She pulled out a tablet. "My nephew works in IT for the school district. Taught me a few things about digital footprints. I don't want to check your shared cloud storage. Most people don't realize their devices sync automatically. Deleted texts, photos, browsing history, it's usually all there if you know where to look." His stomach turned. That feels like a violation. So does being lied to. Her voice softened. "Look, maybe you find nothing. Maybe you find something that has an innocent explanation. But living in limbo is eating you alive. I can see it." That evening, while Sophia attended another networking event, he sat in his study with their old iPad. She'd gotten a new one last Christmas, top of the line, like everything she wanted these days, but the old one still worked, still synced to their shared account. His hands shook as he opened the browser history. Nothing unusual at first. Gallery websites, art blogs, Pinterest boards full of contemporary sculptures. Then, buried in the data from 3 weeks ago, discreet hotels, Santa Fe, how to protect assets in divorce. Is New Mexico a community property state? The room tilted. He gripped the desk, forcing himself to breathe. There had to be an explanation. Research for a friend. A misunderstanding. He kept digging. In the deleted photos folder, he found selfies Sophia had taken that he'd never seen. She looked beautiful but different. Younger somehow. More makeup. Clothes he didn't recognize. In one, a man's hand rested on her shoulder, just the fingers visible. A distinctive silver ring on the index finger. Craig's ring. The browser history yielded more. Reservations at restaurants in Santa Fe and Taos. Always for two. Always on days when she'd told him she was visiting artists or meeting with clients. A charge at La Posada de Santa Fe, $300 for a day room. He was still staring at the screen when headlights swept across the window. Sophia's Lexus pulling into the garage. He closed the iPad, slipped it into his desk drawer, and met her in the kitchen. "You're up late," she said, setting down her purse. Her lipstick was fresh, recently applied. "Couldn't sleep. How was the event?" "Exhausting. All those collectors wanting to talk about investment potential instead of artistic merit." She kicked off her heels. "I'm going to shower. I'll be up in a minute." As soon as he heard the water running, he did something he'd never done in 40 years of marriage. He looked through her purse, past the lipstick and hand cream and gallery business cards. At the bottom, wrapped in a tissue, a receipt from El Nido, Santa Fe's most romantic restaurant. Dinner for two, dated last Tuesday when she'd supposedly been at a gallery opening in Albuquerque, paid in cash. He put everything back exactly as he'd found it and walked outside. The summer heat had broken, and the desert air carried the scent of rain from distant mountains. In the darkness, his Chile fields stretched out like sleeping soldiers. "Need some company?" Miguel, his foreman, emerged from the equipment shed, a concerned look on his weathered face. "What are you doing here so late?" "Checking the irrigation timers. Thought I saw your light on." Miguel had worked the farm for 15 years, since his early 30s. He had an engineer's mind in a farmer's body and an uncanny ability to read people. "Everything all right, Jefe?" "Just thinking." Miguel nodded slowly. "My Maria, she always says thinking after midnight is like shopping when you're hungry. Nothing good comes of it. Maria's a smart woman." "See." Miguel hesitated. "You know, if you ever need anything. I mean, the farm's in good hands. If you needed to take some time, deal with things." "What things?" Miguel looked uncomfortable. "It's not my place, but I see things working here. Cars coming and going. And Senora Sofia, she seems different lately." "Different how?" "Like she's already somewhere else, even when she's here." After Miguel left, he stood in the darkness for a long time, listening to the coyotes calling in the distance. Tomorrow, he'd need to make a decision. Confront Sophia with what he'd found. Pretend he'd seen nothing and hope it went away. Or, he thought about the search history. How to protect assets in divorce. She was already 3 steps ahead, planning her exit while he'd been tending his chiles and trusting in 40 years of marriage. Back in his study, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Seth Navarro, attorney. They'd met at a water rights meeting years ago. Seth specialized in high-asset divorces, with a reputation for being ruthless when the situation called for it. It was too late to call, but first thing in the morning, he looked around the study at the pictures covering the walls. Their wedding day, Sophia radiant in a simple white dress. Their trip to Paris for their 20th anniversary, the gallery's grand opening, both of them grinning with champagne glasses raised. A lifetime of memories, and now he wondered how many of them had been real. Outside, lightning flickered over the Sandias, promising rain that might or might not come. He thought about what Evelyn had said. When your gut talks, listen. When your brain argues, gather evidence. The evidence was mounting, and tomorrow he'd need help from someone who knew what to do with it. Someone who could protect what he'd spent a lifetime building while his wife plotted to take it all away. He climbed the stairs to their bedroom where Sophia was already asleep or pretending to be. Her breathing was too even, too careful. He slipped under the covers, maintaining the careful distance that had grown between them. In the darkness, he made a decision. If she wanted to play games with their life together, he'd play too. But he'd play to win. The naive, trusting husband was gone, buried in a grave of deleted texts and secret dinners. What emerged in his place was someone harder, someone who understood that love wasn't always enough, someone who knew that when trust died, you had two choices: roll over or fight back. He closed his eyes, already planning his next move. The hunt had begun. Seth Navarro's office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and carefully curated Southwestern art. The kind of place designed to intimidate opposing counsel and reassure wealthy clients that their secrets were safe. He sat across from the attorney, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. "Let me make sure I understand," Seth said, fingers steepled like a cathedral. 40 years of marriage, no prenup, significant assets including the farm, retirement accounts, and your wife's gallery, and you suspect infidelity. "I have evidence of infidelity. Show me." He laid out everything like evidence in a court case: the receipts, the browser history, the deleted photos, the charge for the hotel day room. Seth examined each piece with the detachment of a surgeon, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is a good start," Seth finally said. "But in New Mexico, infidelity doesn't affect asset division. What matters is the financial impropriety." He tapped the browser history. "These searches about protecting assets, that suggests she's planning something. We need to move fast." "How fast?" "Today fast. First rule of war. Strike first and strike hard." Seth pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Here's what we're going to do. 1. Freeze any joint accounts you can. Move money into accounts only you control. Legal as long as it's for marital expenses or reasonable living costs. 2. Secure important documents. Deeds, titles, tax returns, financial statements. 3. Hire a forensic accountant to trace any unusual money movements. 4. Get a private investigator to document the affair properly. I don't want some sleazy guy following my wife around. Lawrence Trujillo is a lot of things, but sleazy isn't one of them. Ex-military intelligence. Discreet. Effective. He'll get what we need without anyone knowing he's there." He thought about Sophia waking up this morning, kissing his cheek absently before rushing off to another early meeting, the casual cruelty of it all. "Do it." Seth smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Good. Now let's talk about the farm. You said Craig Delacourt has shown interest?" "He's mentioned it. Multiple times." "Interesting. And he's the one you suspect?" "Yeah. Even more interesting." Seth made another note. "I want you to play along. If he brings up the farm again, act interested but hesitant. See if he pushes. See if your wife suddenly becomes supportive of selling. It could establish conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" "If they're having an affair and plotting to acquire your property below market value, that's fraud. Criminal fraud. The kind that turns a simple divorce into something much more serious." The word criminal hit like cold water. "I don't want Sophia going to jail." You don't want her stealing everything you've worked for either. Seth's voice softened slightly. Look, I've been doing this for 20 years. The spouse who's cheating? They're usually 3 steps ahead. They've had time to plan while you were trusting them. We're playing catch-up, and we need every advantage we can get. He spent the rest of the morning following Seth's instructions. At the bank, he transferred half their liquid assets to a new account, careful to leave enough for household expenses. The teller, who'd known them for years, didn't question it estate planning, he said, and she smiled and nodded. The safe deposit box was harder. Standing in the vault, staring at documents that represented 4 decades of building a life together, his hands shook. Marriage certificate, deed to the house, deed to the farm, insurance policies. He photographed everything with his phone, then took the originals. "Smart man," Evelyn said when he showed up at her house with a box full of papers. "Leave them here. Sophia doesn't need to know they're gone yet. This feels wrong. Being prepared isn't wrong. It's necessary." She poured him a shot of whiskey, even though it was barely noon. "Drink. You look like you need it." That afternoon, he met Lawrence Trujillo at a coffee shop in Old Town. The investigator looked more like a college professor than ex-military wire-rimmed glasses, neat gray beard, quiet voice that probably missed nothing. "Seth filled me in on the basics," Lawrence said. "I'll need access to vehicle information, recent photos, her schedule as you know it. I can have preliminary surveillance in place by tonight. I want to know about the affair, but I also need to know if there's more. Financial stuff. Seth thinks they might be planning something with my property." Lawrence nodded. "People having affairs get careless. They think they're being discreet, but patterns emerge, where they meet, when they meet. Who else knows? I'll find it all." "How long?" "Give me a week. Maybe less if they're as careless as most." Back home, the house felt different. Every room held secrets now. He found himself studying things he'd never noticed was that new artwork on the wall. When had she rearranged the furniture in the den? Small changes that suddenly seemed significant. Sophia came home early, surprising him. "Thought we could have dinner together for once," she said, carrying grocery bags. "I'll make your favorite green chile stew." "Sounds good." He watched her move around the kitchen with practiced ease. 40 years of shared meals, and she still chopped onions the way he'd taught her, still added too much cumin to everything. When had the familiar become a performance? "Craig called earlier," she said, stirring the pot. "He's got some investors interested in rural development. Mentioned your farm again." There it was. Seth had predicted this. He kept his voice neutral. "Oh. I know you love that land, but honey, we're not getting younger. Might be worth hearing what he has to say." "Maybe." She turned, wooden spoon in hand, studying his face. "Really? You'd consider it?" "I don't know. The farm's been struggling. Taxes keep going up. Maybe it's time to think about simplifying." Something flickered in her eyes, relief. "Calculation? Craig could probably get you a good price. He knows all the right people." "I'm sure he does." They ate dinner on the portal, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. Sophia kept the conversation light gallery gossip, plans for the upcoming balloon fiesta, a new restaurant she wanted to try. But underneath, he felt the current of her real thoughts, the plans she was making while smiling at him over green chile stew. His phone buzzed. A text from Lawrence. "Subject meeting CD at Corrala's address. Surveillance in place. CD. Craig Delacourt. Corrala's with its horse properties and hidden driveways. Perfect for secret meetings." "Everything okay?" Sophia asked. "Just Miguel. Irrigation issue. That man works too hard." "You both do." She reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. Her wedding ring caught the dying light. "I worry about you out in those fields all day. Maybe selling wouldn't be the worst thing. We could travel, see the world like we always talked about." He turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. Her skin was soft, pampered. When had she stopped helping in the garden? "Maybe you're right." She squeezed his hand, and for a moment, he saw the woman he'd married bright-eyed, full of dreams, ready to take on the world together. Then she pulled away to answer her phone, and the moment shattered. "I have to take this," she said, already walking inside. Through the window, he watched her pace, gesturing animatedly. Happy, excited, more alive than she'd been at dinner. His own phone buzzed again. Seth this time. Forensic accountant found something. Can you come by tomorrow morning? He typed back a yes, then sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the desert coming alive. Coyotes in the distance, an owl somewhere in the cottonwoods. Inside, Sophia's laughter drifted through the windows. Once that sound had been his favorite music. Now it was evidence. The trap was set. All he had to do was wait for her to walk into it. But sitting there, surrounded by the remnants of a life built on trust, he wondered if winning would feel anything like he imagined. In the kitchen, Sophia ended her call and began cleaning up dinner. Through the window, she looked content, humming something under her breath, planning her escape while he sat 10 feet away, invisible as furniture. He stood, brushed off his jeans, and went inside to help with the dishes. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the practiced dance of a long marriage. She washed, he dried. When they finished, she kissed his cheek brief, distracted, and mentioned she had some gallery work to finish. "I'll be in my study," she said. "Take your time." He waited until he heard her door close, then pulled out his phone to review Lawrence's photos. Sophia's Lexus parked at a adobe house in Corrales. Craig's Range Rover pulling in 20 minutes later. Timestamps showing they'd been there for 3 hours. Tomorrow, Seth's forensic accountant would explain what they'd found. Tomorrow, Lawrence would have more surveillance. Tomorrow, the evidence would mount higher. But tonight, he sat alone in their living room, surrounded by art his money had purchased and photos of trips his trust had made possible, and tried to remember the last time Sophia had looked at him the way she'd looked while talking on that phone call. The answer was simple. She hadn't. Not in years. The architect of justice was patient. The betrayed husband was learning to be. The annual Chillafest Gala transformed the Albuquerque Convention Center into a celebration of everything New Mexican. Red and green chile ristras hung from the ceiling like ceremonial banners. Local artists displayed their work between corporate sponsor booths. The cream of the city's society mingled over top-shelf margaritas and delicate appetizers that bore only passing resemblance to actual local cuisine. He adjusted his bolo tie, the silver and turquoise one Sophia had given him for their 35th anniversary, and surveyed the room. 500 of Albuquerque's finest, and he knew half of them by name. There was Mayor Gonzalez holding court near the silent auction, the Hendersons from the Coop admiring a metal sculpture, and across the room, radiant in a turquoise dress that matched the jewelry at her throat, his wife. Sophia stood with Craig and a cluster of gallery patrons, her laugh carrying over the mariachi band. She looked beautiful, happy, utterly unaware that her world was about to implode. "You sure about this?" Evelyn appeared at his elbow, elegant in black silk. "Once you pull this trigger, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." She studied his face. "Then I'm with you. Always have been." The past week had been a masterclass in deception. Sophia playing the devoted wife while meeting Craig at the Corrales house. Craig pushing harder about the farm, even bringing by a casual offer from mysterious investors. Patricia suddenly interested in his health, asking probing questions about medications, doctors, any signs of forgetfulness. But they'd overplayed their hand. The forensic accountant had found it all $50,000 siphoned from their joint accounts through gallery expenses to an LLC called High Desert Holdings. The LLC that would coincidentally be purchasing his farm for a fraction of its value once they'd forced the sale. Lawrence had recorded Patricia discussing power of attorney documents with someone on the phone, mentioning cognitive decline and protecting assets. Seth had been right. This wasn't just adultery. It was conspiracy. "Showtime," he murmured as the event coordinator announced dinner service. They'd paid extra for a sponsor table near the stage. Sophia had insisted good for the gallery's visibility. Now it would serve a different purpose. He took his seat between Evelyn and Miguel, who'd cleaned up nice in his Western suit. Across from them, Sophia chatted with Craig and Patricia, oblivious to the empty chairs that would soon matter. "Before we start," the coordinator announced, "we have a special presentation. This year's Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to New Mexico agriculture. Sophia glanced at him, surprised. He'd kept this particular detail quiet. This year's recipient has spent 4 decades perfecting the art of growing hatch chiles, supporting local farming initiatives, and mentoring young agriculturalists. Please welcome to the stage. He rose to thunderous applause, making his way through the crowd of well-wishers. The stage lights were bright, hot. 400 faces looked up at him expectantly. In the AV booth, Lawrence gave a subtle thumbs up. "Thank you," he began, voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. 40 years ago, I was just an engineer with a crazy idea about growing chiles. My wife Sophia supported that dream, even when it meant leaving a steady aerospace job for the uncertainty of farming. In the audience, Sophia smiled, dabbing at her eyes. Ever the performer. Together we built something beautiful. Or so I thought. He paused, let the words sink in. But this year, I learned that the most important harvest isn't what you pull from the ground. It's the truth you uncover when lies have taken root. The audience shifted, uncertain. Sophia's smile faltered. You see, while I was tending my fields, my wife was tending other gardens. The screen behind him flickered to life. With Craig Delacourt. The first image. Sophia's car at the Corrales house. Then Craig's arrival. Timestamps clear. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Infidelity is painful but survivable, he continued as more images appeared. Financial documents, wire transfers, the LLC paperwork. But when it comes with conspiracy to steal everything you've worked for, well, that requires a different kind of response. Turn it off. Craig lurched to his feet, face purple with rage. Lawrence and 2 security guards stepped forward, blocking his path to the AV booth. The really interesting part, he said, clicking to the next slide, is this power of attorney document my sister-in-law Patricia was preparing. Apparently, I'm showing signs of cognitive decline. Funny how that coincides with an offer to buy my farm for 20 cents on the dollar. Audio filled the ballroom. Patricia's voice recorded on Lawrence's surveillance equipment. Once he signs the power of attorney, we can push the sale through. He's getting forgetful anyway. Who's going to believe him over a registered nurse and his devoted wife? Patricia shrieked, standing so fast her chair toppled. You can't! This is illegal! You recorded me without— New Mexico is a one-party consent state, Seth announced, stepping into view with a stack of papers. And fraud is a felony. The screen filled with text messages between Sophia and Craig. Nothing sexually explicit, they'd been careful about that, but the financial planning was damning. Once the farm sells, we're free. The gallery losses will explain the missing money. Thank God Patricia knows doctors who'll sign off on the evaluation. Sophia. His voice cut through the chaos. She sat frozen, face white as alabaster. 40 years, 4 decades of morning coffee and shared dreams and trust. And you threw it away for what? A flashier life? A younger man with Italian shoes? I can explain, she whispered. But the microphone caught it, broadcast it to 400 people who would never look at her the same way. No need. He set the trophy on the podium with deliberate care. Seth has your divorce papers. The forensic accountant has documented every penny you stole. The criminal fraud charges will be filed Monday morning. Criminal? Craig found his voice. You can't prove. Your accountant, Ben, already flipped, Seth interrupted. Turns out he values his CPA license more than your friendship. We have everything. The room erupted. Camera phones appeared. Half the local news stations had reporters here for the feel-good agricultural story. They'd gotten something far more explosive. Craig tried to push toward the exit, but uniformed officers were already waiting. Lawrence had coordinated everything perfectly. You bastard! Sophia stood, magnificence in her fury. You planned this. You humiliated me in front of everyone who matters. He met her gaze steadily. Yes, I did. You wanted to take my farm, my savings, my dignity. You plotted with your lover to have me declared incompetent. You were going to lock me away and steal everything while I rotted. It wasn't like that. The evidence says otherwise. Patricia broke for the exit, but didn't make it far. More officers waited in the lobby, Seth's criminal complaints in hand. The room watched in stunned silence as she was escorted out, wailing about debts and pressure and how it wasn't supposed to happen like this. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning back to the audience, "I apologize for disrupting your evening. But sometimes the truth needs a public forum. Sometimes those who play with fire need to feel the burn." He stepped down from the stage, Evelyn meeting him halfway with his jacket. "How do you feel?" she asked quietly. "Empty, satisfied, sick, all of it." They walked through the crowd that parted like the Red Sea. Behind them, Sophia's world collapsed in real time. Gallery patrons turned their backs. Society friends whispered behind raised hands. Craig was being led away in handcuffs, still blustering about lawsuits and connections. In the parking lot, the desert air was cool and clean. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight of 40 years lifting from his shoulders. "What now?" Evelyn asked. "Now? I go home. Tomorrow I'll tend my chiles. Next week I'll meet with Seth about the divorce. Next month maybe I'll start remembering who I was before I became half of something that was mostly lie." "And Sophia?" He looked back at the convention center, where blue and red lights were beginning to flash. "Sophia made her choices. Now she gets to live with them." Miguel waited by the truck, holding the door open. "Jefe, you okay?" "I will be." As they drove away, he didn't look back. Didn't need to. The sound of Sophia's perfect life incinerating was enough. She'd wanted passion, excitement, danger. She'd gotten all three, just not the way she'd planned. The farm was quiet when they arrived, bathed in moonlight. He walked through his fields, touching leaves and testing soil, grounding himself in what was real, what was his, what no one could take away. Inside the house, he ignored the blinking answering machine, the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and questions and the messy business of untangling 4 decades. But tonight, he sat in his chair with a beer and let himself feel the burn of betrayal transforming into something else. Not forgiveness. Not yet, maybe not ever. But freedom. Cold, clean, and absolute. The inferno had consumed everything false in his life. Tomorrow he'd start building something new from the ashes. The Bernalillo County Courthouse had seen its share of messy divorces, but even the bailiffs stopped to stare as Sophia Reeves entered with her new attorney. Gone was the polished gallery owner in designer clothes. This woman wore a simple black suit, her hair pulled back severely, playing the part of the wronged wife. She'd learned new roles quickly. He sat with Seth at the respondent's table, watching her performance with the detachment of someone studying a stranger. 6 weeks since Chillafest. 6 weeks of legal maneuvering, media coverage, and the systematic dismantling of 40 years. "Your Honor," Sophia's attorney began, "my client has been publicly humiliated, falsely accused, and subjected to a vindictive campaign by a man who clearly orchestrated this entire situation. The criminal charges are baseless. The financial allegations are fabricated. Mrs. Reeves is the victim here." Seth didn't even look up from his notes. When it was his turn, he simply activated his laptop. "Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit A through. Let's see. Exhibit Q." The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing the systematic drain of marital assets, the LLC documentation with Sophia's signature, recorded conversations between her and Craig planning the fraud, Patricia's confession, given in exchange for immunity from prosecution. "Exhibit M is particularly interesting," Seth continued, pulling up a document. "A draft power of attorney form found on Mrs. Reeves's computer, dated 3 months before the respondent discovered the affair. It seems she was planning to have him declared incompetent before he even knew there was a problem." "That's not I never." Sophia's composure cracked. "You never what?" Seth asked mildly. "Never planned to steal his life's work? Never conspired with your lover to buy his farm for a fraction of its value? Never worked with your sister to fabricate medical evidence?" "Objection!" her attorney shouted. "Sustained! Mr. Navarro, save it for trial!" But the damage was done. The judge had seen enough. "Given the evidence presented," the judge said after a recess, "I'm granting the temporary orders as requested by the respondent. All marital assets are frozen pending final division. Mrs. Reeves is ordered to vacate the marital home within 72 hours. The farm and all business operations remain under Mr. Reeves's sole control." "Your Honor, where is my client supposed to live?" Sophia's attorney protested. "That's not the court's concern." She should have considered that before allegedly transferring $50,000 to her boyfriend's LLC. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. He pushed through them silently while Seth gave a brief statement about justice and consequences. In the parking lot, Sophia caught up to them, her careful composure shattered. "How could you do this to me?" she hissed. 40 years and you destroy me over what? Some mistakes?" "Mistakes?" He turned to face her fully for the first time in weeks. "You call systematic fraud a mistake? Planning to have me declared incompetent? Stealing our savings? Which part was the mistake, Sophia?" "I never meant—" She stopped, maybe realizing how hollow any explanation would sound. "I loved you once." "No. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference." Her attorney pulled her away, whispering urgently about avoiding further statements. But she looked back once, and in her eyes, he saw something that might have been regret, or maybe just rage at being caught. That evening, Evelyn came by with a bottle of good scotch and Chinese takeout. They sat on the portal, watching the sunset paint the mountains, not talking about the woman who used to share this view. "Craig's trial starts next month," Evelyn said eventually. "Patricia called. Wanted to know if you'd consider speaking on her behalf at sentencing." "No." "That's what I told her. But she wanted me to tell you she's sorry, for what it's worth." "It's worth exactly nothing." Miguel appeared from the fields, dirt-stained and grinning. "Jefe, you need to see the new growth on the hybrid plants. I think we've got something special." He followed his foreman out to the experimental plots, grateful for the distraction. The chiles were thriving, oblivious to human drama. Green leaves reached toward the fading light, full of promise. "The agricultural extension wants to feature our organic program," Miguel continued. "Maybe even some grant money, if you're interested." "I'm interested." Life was moving forward with or without his participation. He could choose to be dragged along or take the wheel. After 40 years of letting Sophia steer, the choice was surprisingly easy. His phone buzzed. Lawrence, with an update on the criminal cases. Craig's assets had been frozen after investigators found evidence of other fraudulent dealings. Seems Sophia wasn't his first mark, just the most recent. The man who'd always had an eye for opportunity had finally focused on the wrong target. "You did good, boss," Miguel said quietly. "Takes courage to stand up like that, to tell the truth when everyone's watching." Didn't feel like courage. Felt like survival. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. Back at the house, he found a box on the doorstep. Sophia's things from the gallery, the personal items she'd left behind in her rush to evacuate. He recognized the handwriting on the label. Her assistant, probably following orders but clearly uncomfortable. Inside were photos from gallery openings, a coffee mug he'd given her that said "World's Best Wife," and inexplicably, their wedding album. He flipped through it, studying their young faces. Had she ever really been that girl? Had he ever really known her? The phone rang. Her lawyer, proposing a settlement. She'd take a lump sum, sign away any claim to the farm or his retirement accounts, and they could avoid a trial. How much? The number was reasonable. More than she deserved, but less than a trial would cost. Seth would advise taking it, he knew. Clean break, move on. "I'll consider it," he said, though he'd already decided. The money was just money. What he wanted 40 years back, the woman he'd thought he'd married, the future they'd planned, none of that was on the table. He built a fire in the outdoor fireplace, then sat watching the flames dance. One by one, he fed the photos from the box into the fire. Not from anger anymore. That had burned itself out. This was ceremony, acknowledgement. Goodbye to the gallery openings where he'd stood proudly beside her. Goodbye to the vacations where she'd already been planning her escape. Goodbye to the woman who'd never really existed outside his imagination. The wedding album he kept. Not from sentiment, but as evidence. Proof that even the smartest people could be fools. That love could blind you to the truth staring you in the face. That sometimes the person sharing your bed was the stranger you should fear most. "You okay?" Evelyn had returned, standing in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. Getting there. That's all anyone can ask. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire consume the last remnants of his former life. Tomorrow would bring more legal documents, more decisions, more steps toward whatever came next. But tonight, with his oldest friend beside him and his field sleeping peacefully under the stars, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of clarity. Sophia had played with fire and they'd all been burned. But burns healed, leaving skin that was tougher, less likely to blister. He was learning that lesson one day at a time. The meeting took place in Seth's conference room on a Thursday morning that felt more like winter than fall. Patricia sat across from him, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 2 months. Her nurse's scrubs hung loose on her frame, and her hands shook as she lifted her coffee cup. "Thank you for seeing me," she began. "Seth said you had information. That's the only reason you're here." She flinched, but nodded. "I need you to understand. I never wanted it to go this far. The plan, it started small. Sophia was just venting at first about being bored, about wanting more from life. Then Craig started coming around more often." "When?" "About 2 years ago. He'd drop by the gallery, take her to lunch. Innocent at first, or maybe not. I don't know anymore." Patricia stared at her coffee. "She said you'd grown distant, that you cared more about your chills than your marriage. So she decided to steal everything?" "It wasn't supposed to be stealing. She said you'd want to sell the farm eventually anyway, that she was just accelerating the timeline, making sure you both got what you deserved." Seth leaned forward. "Tell him about the medical aspect. All of it." Patricia's face crumpled. "I have gambling debts, bad ones, the kind where people break your legs if you don't pay. Sophia knew. She offered to help if I—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "If I helped establish a pattern of concern about your mental state. Nothing dramatic, just comments to the right people, suggestions that you were becoming forgetful, confused. You were going to have me committed? Not committed, just declared unable to manage complex financial decisions. Sophia would get power of attorney, sell the farm to Craig's company, pay off my debts, and you'd be taken care of. Nice assisted living facility, regular visits. She said it was better than watching you work yourself to death in those fields." The rationalization was breathtaking. He felt Evelyn's hand on his arm, grounding him. "How much?" he asked. "What? How much do you owe?" Patricia whispered a number that made even Seth whistle. "I know how it sounds, but they were going to hurt me. Maybe kill me. Sophia was my only hope. So you sold out your brother-in-law instead. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "Tell him the rest," Seth prompted. "About the gallery." Patricia pulled out a folder with shaking hands. "Sophia's been siphoning money for 3 years, not just the 50,000 you found. She'd sell paintings for cash, report them as lesser sales or not at all. The real books are here." The documents painted a picture of systematic embezzlement. Hundreds of thousands hidden, laundered, moved offshore. His successful wife's successful gallery had been a front for theft on a scale that took his breath away. Craig knew? Craig suggested it. He'd done it before with other women. Sophia wasn't special to him. She was just useful. Rich husband, profitable business, trusting nature, his perfect mark. But she loved him. Patricia laughed bitterly. She loved the idea of him, the excitement, the promises of a different life. He played her like a violin, and she never saw it coming, just like I never saw her coming. Yeah. After Patricia left, clutching a check Seth had authorized enough to keep her creditors at bay while she testified, he sat in the conference room feeling hollowed out. 3 years, he said. She's been planning this for 3 years. At least, Seth confirmed. The forensic accountant thinks it might go back further. Want us to keep digging? No, I know enough. That afternoon, Lawrence called with news from Craig's camp. His lawyer's pushing for a plea deal. 5 to 7 years, forfeit all assets, full restitution. The feds found 6 other women he's done this to over the past decade. 6 others? Different states, same pattern. Find a wealthy woman in a stale marriage, seduce her, convince her to embezzle from the husband, then vanish with the money. Except this time he got greedy. Wanted the farm too, stayed too long. What happens to Sophia? Without Craig's protection, without money for good lawyers, she's looking at serious time. The embezzlement alone is 10 to 15 years. He thought about Sophia in a federal prison, that carefully maintained exterior finally stripped away. It should have brought satisfaction. Instead, He felt only a deep weariness. "Boss." Miguel knocked on his home office door. "There's someone here to see you." The woman waiting in his living room was elegant in an understated way. Mid-40s, professional, with tired eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Reeves? I'm Diana Morrison. Craig Delacourt destroyed my life 5 years ago in Denver. I heard about your case and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For stopping him, for having the courage to go public." She sat carefully like someone who'd learned not to trust furniture. "My husband didn't. He was too proud, too ashamed, quietly divorced me, settled out of court, let Craig walk away. 6 months later, David killed himself." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I'm sorry. So am I. Every day, but you didn't let them win. You didn't go quietly. Because of you, Craig's finally facing justice. The other women he's hurt were finally being heard." She left her contact information, in case he ever wanted to talk. After she gone, he stood at the window watching her drive away, thinking about paths not taken. He could have been David Morrison, too proud to admit he'd been fooled, too ashamed to fight back. The man had chosen death over disclosure. He'd chosen disclosure over death, but it had been closer than anyone knew. Those first nights after discovering the affair, he'd stood in his garage staring at the rope coiled on the wall, wondering if 40 years of lies was too much weight to carry. The fields had saved him. The simple act of tending growing things, of watching life persist despite drought and flood and human neglect. Every morning in the dirt reminded him that he was more than Sophia's husband, more than Craig's mark, more than Patricia's meal ticket. He was a farmer. And farmers knew that sometimes you had to burn a field to make it fertile again. That evening, alone in the house that echoed with absence, he made a decision. The settlement Sophia's lawyer had proposed, he'd take it. Not from mercy, but from exhaustion. Let her have enough to start over somewhere else, become someone else's problem. The criminal charges would proceed without his input anyway. Seth called it generous. Evelyn called it foolish. Miguel just nodded like he understood. Sometimes, Jefe, the best victory is the one that lets you sleep at night. Sleep was still elusive, but it was getting easier. The ghosts were quieter now, their accusations less sharp. He'd been a fool, yes. Trusted too much, saw too little. But he'd also acted with courage when it mattered, stood up in front of everyone who mattered and told the truth. That had to count for something. Winter came early to the valley, frost painting the fields silver in the dawn light. He worked alone, preparing the soil for next season, finding meditation in the repetitive tasks. The farm had become his monastery, the rows his prayer beads. News of Sophia filtered through despite his best efforts to avoid it. She'd taken the settlement barely enough to cover a year's expenses and moved to a studio apartment on the wrong side of town. The gallery had been seized, its contents auctioned to pay restitution. Her society friends had vanished like smoke. "Saw her at Smith's yesterday," Evelyn mentioned over lunch at their usual diner. "Buying generic brands, wearing sweatpants." Good for her. She looked terrible. Also good for her. Evelyn studied him. The anger's still there. The anger may always be there, but it's not running the show anymore. Craig's sentencing made the evening news. 7 years federal time, no possibility of early release. The cameras caught him being led away in shackles, his confident smile finally extinguished. 6 other women gave victim impact statements. Diana Morrison went last, speaking about her dead husband with a steady voice that carried more weight than tears. He'd been invited to speak but declined. Everything he needed to say had been said at Chillafest. The house felt different these days. Cleaner, maybe. Simpler. He'd packed away most of Sophia's art, donated her clothes to charity, turned her study into a workshop for his new woodworking hobby. The marriage bed had been the first thing to go, replaced with something that had never known the weight of lies. But late at night, muscle memory still reached for the empty space beside him. 40 years of habits died hard. "You need to get out more," Evelyn insisted one evening, dragging him to a community center art show. "Can't hide in those fields forever." "I'm not hiding, I'm healing." Same thing if you do it too long. The art show was pleasant enough, local artists, sincere if not spectacular. He found himself studying the prices, remembering Sophia's gallery markups, her stories about discovering new talent. How much of that had been real? Had she ever truly loved the art, or just the status it brought? "You're thinking too loud," a voice said beside him. Dr. Anya Sharma stood examining the same landscape he'd been staring through. She wore jeans and a fleece jacket, her gray-streaked hair in a practical braid. They'd spoken briefly at the farmer's market a few times, professional conversations about soil nitrogen and organic pest control. "Occupational hazard," he said. "Engineers overthink everything. Botanists, too. We should form a support group." Her smile was warm, uncomplicated. "I heard about everything. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Truth needed telling." "Still, 40 years is a long time to discover you've been living with a stranger." Something in her tone suggested personal experience. He filed that away, not pushing. They walked through the exhibit together, making small talk about art and farming and the early frost. She had an easy laugh, the kind that invited participation rather than performance. When the evening ended, they exchanged numbers. Professional purposes, of course, soil consultation, nothing more. But driving home through the dark valley, he found himself smiling for the first time in months. Patricia's trial began the week before Christmas. She pled guilty to conspiracy charges in exchange for testimony and probation. On the stand, she laid out the entire scheme in excruciating detail. Sophia sat in the gallery, her public defender beside her, watching her sister destroy any hope of mounting a defense. He attended one day, needing to hear it from Patricia's mouth. The plan had been even more elaborate than he'd known. Fake medical consultations, forged documents, a psychiatrist willing to sign commitment papers for the right price. If he hadn't discovered the affair when he did, he might have spent his remaining years in a memory care unit while Sophia and Craig divided his legacy. "Did you ever think about what you were doing to him?" the prosecutor asked. Patricia looked directly at him for the first time. "Every day. But I thought about what would happen to me if I didn't pay my debts more." Outside the courthouse, Sophia waited by his truck. 3 months had transformed her from gallery goddess to someone who looked homeless. Her designer clothes replaced by thrift store finds. Her perfect hair now showing gray roots. The confident posture collapsed into something defensive, hunted. "I need to talk to you," she said. "No. Please, 5 minutes." He looked at this stranger wearing his wife's face. "You have until I finish this cigarette." He didn't smoke, had never smoked, but there was a pack in his glove compartment, Lawrence's, left behind months ago. He lit one inexpertly, buying time. "I'm sorry," she began. "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught." "That's not." "Okay, yes. That too. But I'm also sorry for what I became, what I let Craig convince me I wanted." She wrapped thin arms around herself. "He's written me off, you know. Won't even add me to his visitor list. I was just another mark to him." "You were a willing mark." "Yes." The admission seemed to deflate her further. "I threw away a real life for a fantasy. A good man for a con artist. A home for this." She gestured at herself. "I'm working at a call center now, minimum wage, living in a place with roaches, eating ramen, and the funny thing, I deserve every bit of it." The cigarette burned his fingers. He dropped it, ground it under his boot. "What do you want, Sophia?" "Forgiveness?" "No." "Then, understanding? That I wasn't always this person? That once upon a time I really did love you?" He thought about the young woman in the wedding album, bright-eyed and laughing. Had that person ever existed, or had he simply projected what he wanted to see onto a blank canvas? "Maybe you did. Maybe we both loved who we thought the other person was, but that doesn't change what you chose to do." "I know." She pulled out an envelope. "My lawyer says I'm looking at 5 to 7 years, probably serve 3 with good behavior. I wanted to give you this before. Inside was a single photo he'd never seen. Their trip to Paris, their 20th anniversary. They stood before Notre Dame, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. They looked happy, real. "Why?" he asked. "Because I want you to know it wasn't all lies. That photo. That was the last time I was genuinely happy. Before I started wanting more, before Craig, before I destroyed everything good in my life chasing something that didn't exist." She walked away without waiting for a response, shoulders hunched against the winter wind. He sat in his truck for a long time, staring at the photo. Then he carefully tore it in half, keeping the side with just him, laughing in front of an ancient cathedral. The other half, Sophia, frozen in a moment of genuine joy he let the wind take. Some ghosts deserve to be set free. That night, Anya called about a soil question that could have waited until morning. They talked for an hour about minerals and pH levels and crop rotation, the comfortable conversation of two people who understood the earth better than they understood people. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" she asked finally. "To discuss the spring planting schedule, of course." "Of course," he agreed, smiling at the wall. "How about tomorrow?" After they hung up, he walked through his empty house with new eyes, not a mausoleum anymore, just a structure waiting to be filled with different memories. Better ones, maybe. Honest ones, certainly. Outside, the field slept under a blanket of frost, dreaming of spring. He stood among them, breathing the cold air, feeling something shift in his chest. Not healing, not yet, but the possibility of it. The hollow echoes were fading, replaced by something that sounded almost like hope. Spring arrived like a tentative friend, unsure of its welcome. He worked the fields as the earth warmed, turning soil that had been patient through the winter. The simple rhythm of preparing for new growth had become his meditation, his therapy, his way back to himself. "You're early," Anya observed, arriving with her soil testing kit and a thermos of coffee. Their weekly consultations had become the highlight of his schedule, though neither of them mentioned that fact. "Couldn't sleep. Figured the plants wouldn't mind the company." "They never do." She knelt beside him, running earth through her fingers with the reverence of someone who understood its value. "This is beautiful soil. You've been amending it?" "Compost from the coop. Miguel's idea." They worked in comfortable silence, taking samples and making notes. 6 months of careful friendship had taught him that Anya didn't need constant conversation. Her presence was enough steady, undemanding, real in a way he'd forgotten people could be. "I heard Sophia was sentenced yesterday," she said eventually, not looking up from her work. 3 to 5 years. Federal minimum security. "How do you feel about that?" He considered the question, appreciating that she'd asked how he felt rather than offering platitudes. Relieved. Empty. Sad for the waste of it all. Mostly just ready to move on. "That's healthy." "Is it? Sometimes I think I should feel more. Rage. Satisfaction. Something dramatic." Anya sat back on her heels, studying him with dark eyes that held their own shadows. "When my husband left me for his graduate student, everyone expected me to be devastated, to rage and cry and seek revenge. Instead, I felt free, like I'd been released from a play I'd never auditioned for." "How long were you married?" 15 years. Long enough to have patterns. Not long enough to forget who I was without him." She smiled ruefully. "Though it took time to remember. Time and a lot of dirt under my fingernails." "The earth heals," he agreed, "even when people can't." Evelyn joined them for lunch, spreading a picnic on the tailgate of his truck. She'd appointed herself social director of his recovery, showing up with food and forced cheer whenever she sensed him retreating too far into solitude. "The Veterans Woodworking Group wants to feature your pieces in their spring sale," she announced, unpacking sandwiches. "That chess set you made? They think it could go for real money." "It's not for sale." "Everything's for—" Evelyn caught herself wincing. "Sorry, poor choice of words." "Craig's favorite phrase," he explained to Anya. "Everything's for sale at the right price." "Was he wrong?" Anya asked gently. "Yes, some things aren't for sale. Trust, integrity, the ability to sleep peacefully beside someone." He accepted a sandwich from Evelyn. "Those things can be destroyed, but not bought or sold." They ate watching the mountains, where snow still clung to the peaks, despite the valley's warmth. Miguel emerged from the equipment shed with news about the organic certification progress. The farm was thriving, orders already coming in for the fall harvest. "You've built something good here," Anya observed as Miguel headed back to work. "Something lasting." "We all have," he corrected. "Miguel, the coop, even Evelyn with her nagging. It takes a village to raise a Chile." "Terrible joke," Evelyn muttered. but she was smiling. That afternoon, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was Craig's Rolex, the one he'd worn like a badge of success. A note in shaky handwriting. Thought you should have this. Payment on a debt I can never fully repay. Ben. The accountant who'd flipped, who'd provided evidence of Craig's other schemes. He held the watch up to the light, this symbol of everything Craig had valued. Then he drove to the pawn shop and traded it for store credit, which he donated to the youth farming program. Some symbols deserved new meanings. You're different, Anya noted that evening as they walked through the experimental plots. The sun painted everything gold, including the silver threading through her braid. Different how? Lighter, like you've put down something heavy. Maybe I have. He stopped beside a row of promising seedlings. Anya, would you like to have dinner with me? Not a consultation, not soil talk, just dinner. She studied him with those careful botanist's eyes. Are you ready for that? I don't know, but I'm ready to find out. Her smile bloomed slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. Then yes, I'd like that very much. They made plans for Saturday, somewhere simple, no pressure. As she drove away, he felt a flutter of something he'd forgotten existed. Not love too soon, too complicated for that word, but possibility, interest, the awareness that life might hold chapters he hadn't imagined. Inside, he found the wedding album he'd kept as evidence. For months it had sat like an accusation, proof of his blindness. Now he flipped through it one last time, seeing it differently. Not a document of deception, but a record of hope. Two young people who'd believed in forever, even if they'd been wrong about what that meant. He built a fire in the outdoor fireplace and fed the album to the flames, page by page, not from anger this time, but from acceptance. The past was finished. It could inform the future, but not control it. Good for you. He turned to find Evelyn watching from the doorway, approval clear on her face. It was time. Past time. And dinner with Anya? How did you? Please, I've known you since we were 12. You can't hide that kind of nervous excitement from me. She joined him by the fire. She's good people, steady, real, nothing like Sophia, I know. I was going to say nothing like what you're used to, which might be exactly what you need. The last of the album crumbled to ash, carried away on the evening breeze. Somewhere, Sophia was learning to live with the consequences of her choices. Craig was discovering that federal prison was nothing like his comfortable life. Patricia was working double shifts to pay legitimate debts, her gambling days behind her. And here he stood, surrounded by fields that would bloom again, friends who'd stood by him, and the possibility of something new with a woman who understood both soil and solitude. The grand revenge he'd orchestrated had been necessary, but this quiet rebuilding was the real victory. Come on, Evelyn said, linking her arm through his. Let's go inside. I brought wine, and you're going to need practice making conversation that doesn't involve pH levels or plant diseases. My conversation skills are fine. When's the last time you went on a first date? 1974. I rest my case. They laughed, walking into the house that no longer echoed with absence. Tomorrow he'd work the fields again, preparing for a harvest that promised to be the best yet. Tomorrow he'd start learning how to be just himself, not half of something broken. But tonight, with spring soft in the air and hope stubborn in his chest, he'd practice remembering how to begin again. The seeds were planted. All they needed now was time, patience, and the right conditions to grow. The federal prison's visiting room smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken promises. He sat at a metal table, watching the door where Sophia would emerge, wondering why he'd agreed to this. Seth flanked him, briefcase at the ready, professional armor against whatever manipulation she might attempt. You don't have to do this, Seth murmured. We've got everything we need legally. I know, but I need to see her. One last time. The woman who shuffled through the door bore little resemblance to the gallery goddess he'd married. Prison gray washed out her complexion. Her hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp and showing more silver than he remembered. But it was her eyes that had changed most, the calculating sparkle replaced by something hollow, defeated. She sat across from him, hands folded on the scarred table. For a moment, Neither spoke. "You look well," she finally said. "You don't?" A bitter smile. "Federal prison isn't known for its spa services." "Why did you want to see me, Sophia?" She glanced at Seth, then back to him. "I wanted to apologize. Not the lawyer-crafted apology from the trial. A real one." "I'm listening." "I destroyed us. Not just our marriage, us. Who we were together. Who we could have been." Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what I think about in here? Not Craig. He was just a symptom. Not the money or the gallery. I think about Sunday mornings in bed with the Times. Your terrible coffee that I pretended to like. The way you'd hum when you were happy in the garden. Don't. I think about how I had everything and convinced myself it wasn't enough. How I let boredom and vanity turn me into someone I don't even recognize." She leaned forward slightly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know that's impossible. I just wanted you to know that the woman who loved you, she was real, before I killed her with my own stupidity." He studied her face, searching for the manipulation, the angle, found only exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. "The woman I loved wouldn't have plotted to have me declared incompetent, wouldn't have stolen from our future to fund an affair, wouldn't have— I know." The words came out sharp, pained. "God, don't you think I know? Every night in that cell I catalog my crimes, not just the legal ones. The small betrayals, the lies that became so easy, the way I looked at you and saw an obstacle instead of a partner." "What do you want from me, Sophia?" "Nothing. Everything. To know that somewhere in the world the man I hurt most might one day remember something good about us, that it wasn't all poison." He thought about the photo from Paris, the half he'd kept, young and laughing and unaware of what was coming. There were good times, but they don't erase what you chose to do. No, they don't. She stood slowly, like an old woman. "Take care of yourself. Find someone who deserves you. Be happy in spite of me, not because of my absence." "I'm working on it." She nodded, turned to go, then looked back. "For what it's worth, Anya seems lovely. I saw the article about your organic certification, the photo of you two at the farmer's market. You look peaceful." Before he could respond, she was gone, shuffling back to her cell and the consequences she'd earned. He sat for a moment, processing the strange mix of closure and unfinished business that lingered in her wake. "You okay?" Seth asked. "Yeah, I think I am." Outside, the spring air tasted of freedom and possibility. He drove back to the farm in silence, windows down, letting the wind carry away the prison's stench and the weight of final words. Anya was in the experimental greenhouse when he arrived, bent over seedlings with the concentration of a surgeon. She looked up at his approach, reading his face with the intuition that had become second nature between them. "How was it?" "Necessary. Strange. Over." She nodded, not pushing for more. They'd been taking things slow, coffee becoming lunch, lunch becoming dinner, dinner becoming long walks through the desert, talking about everything and nothing. 6 months of careful friendship evolving into something neither of them wanted to rush or name. "These tomatoes are going to be spectacular," she said, changing the subject with practiced ease. "The soil amendments are working better than we hoped. Everything you touch seems to thrive." She smiled, that quiet expression that transformed her face. "Plants are easy. They're honest about what they need. People are more complicated. Some people are worth the complication." Their eyes met across the seedlings, a moment of understanding passing between them. Not a declaration too soon for that, but an acknowledgement, a possibility taking root as surely as the plants around them. That evening, Evelyn hosted dinner at her house, a subtle celebration of his prison visit being complete. Miguel and his wife Maria joined them, along with a few friends from the veterans' woodworking group. Anya fit into the gathering seamlessly, discussing soil chemistry with Miguel and trading teaching stories with Evelyn. "She's good for you," Evelyn murmured as they cleared plates. "Steady. Real. We're just friends. The best relationships start that way. Trust me, after 35 years of marriage, friendship is what survives when the fireworks fade." He watched Anya helping Maria with dessert, laughing at something Miguel had said. There were no fireworks, no dramatic passion, just a warm sense of rightness, of pieces fitting together without force. Later, as the evening wound down, Anya walked with him to check the irrigation timers. The desert was alive with spring sounds, coyotes calling, owls hunting, the whisper of wind through new growth. "Thank you for not asking about the prison visit," he said. "You'll tell me when you're ready, or you won't. Either is fine." She apologized, seemed sincere, said you seemed lovely. Anya's step faltered slightly. "She knows about me?" "Apparently. Saw some article." "How do you feel about that?" He considered the question, appreciating her directness. Like a chapter closing, like permission I didn't know I was waiting for, like maybe it's okay to start writing a new story. She slipped her hand into his, a gesture as natural as breathing. Stories written later in life often have more depth. We know who we are by then, what we really want, what actually matters. What do you want? Honest companionship, shared purpose, someone who understands that love at our age isn't about drama. It's about choosing to face whatever comes next together. She squeezed his hand gently. "What do you want?" "To wake up without checking if I'm alone, to share the small victories in the greenhouse, to trust again without looking for betrayal around every corner." That's a good list. They walked in comfortable silence, hands linked, no need to define what was growing between them. Trust, he was learning, could be rebuilt. Not the blind trust of youth, but something stronger trust tempered by experience, chosen rather than assumed. Back at the house, as Anya prepared to leave, she turned at her car door. "Would you like to come to Easter dinner at my daughter's next week? Fair warning, she's protective and will probably interrogate you." "I'd like that." "Should I be nervous?" "No, just be yourself. That's more than enough." After she drove away, he stood in his driveway looking up at the stars. Somewhere, Sophia was locked in a cell of her own making. Craig was learning that federal prison was nothing like the country clubs he'd frequented. Patricia was working double shifts, slowly paying off debts both financial and karmic. And here he was, free under the vast New Mexico sky, building something new with a woman who saw beauty in soil and honesty. The wound Sophia had left would always bear a scar. But scar tissue, he'd learned, was stronger than virgin skin. Inside, he found a text from Anya. "Thank you for trusting me with your evening. Sleep well." He smiled, typing back. "Thank you for making trust feel possible again. It wasn't love yet. But it was the whisper of what love could become when built on truth instead of illusion, partnership instead of performance." And for now, that whisper was enough. The summer sun blazed overhead as trucks began arriving at dawn, loaded with families ready for the first harvest under the Redemption Reserve label. What had started as a bitter joke redemption grown from betrayal's ashes had become something real. The organic Hatch Chile operation was thriving beyond anything he'd imagined. "Jefe, where do you want the weighing station?" Miguel called out, directing traffic with the efficiency of a general. "Near the main tent. And make sure the water stations are full, it's going to be a scorcher." The farm had transformed into a community gathering place. Local families came to pick chiles, learning about sustainable farming while earning fair wages. Food trucks lined the entrance, their owners committed to using his produce. Artists vetted carefully to avoid gallery associations displayed works inspired by the agricultural landscape. "This is incredible," Anya said, appearing with a clipboard and her reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd taken on coordinating the educational component, creating workshops on soil health and organic practices. "We have 40 families signed up for the composting workshop alone." "We?" She colored slightly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to presume." "No." He caught her hand. "I like the sound of we." 6 months had passed since that first tentative hand-holding. 6 months of dinners and desert walks, of shared books and long conversations. They'd taken every step slowly, carefully, building something solid. Last month, she'd started leaving a toothbrush at his house. Small things that meant everything. "Get a room, you two," Evelyn teased, passing with a tray of her famous green chile cornbread for the volunteers. "Or better yet, get to work. These chiles won't harvest themselves." The day unfolded in organized chaos. Children ran between the rows, learning to identify ripe chilies. Their parents worked steadily, filling baskets while discussing everything from local politics to recipes. The Veterans Woodworking Group had set up a booth displaying cutting boards and bowls made from reclaimed wood, including pieces he'd crafted during his darker months. "Senor Reeves?" A young woman approached, notebook in hand. "I'm Rosa Gutierrez from the New Mexico Agricultural Review. Could I ask you a few questions about the Redemption Reserve?" He glanced at Anya, who nodded encouragingly. Press still made him nervous, too many memories of cameras at Chillafest, but this was different. This was about building something, not tearing it down. "What would you like to know?" "How did you transition from conventional to organic farming? What inspired the change?" He thought carefully. Sometimes life forces you to examine everything you thought you knew, to strip away what's artificial and focus on what's real. Organic farming is like that, honest, challenging, worth the extra effort. And the name? Redemption Reserve? We all need second chances. The land, the farmers, even old engineers who thought they knew everything. He gestured at the bustling scene. This place is about growing more than chiles. It's about community, sustainability, proving that good things can come from difficult times. Rosa scribbled notes, then looked up with a shy smile. "My family knew your ex-wife, had art in her gallery. What you did at Chillafest, that took courage. It took desperation. But what we're doing now, this takes hope." As the day wore on, he found himself watching the life flowing through his fields. Miguel teaching teenagers about irrigation, Evelyn holding court at the Heritage Seed display, Anya leading a group through the greenhouse, her passion for plants infectious. This was what he'd protected, what Sophia and Craig had tried to steal, not just land but possibility. "You've built something beautiful," a familiar voice said. He turned to find Diana Morrison, Craig's victim from Denver, standing with a man who must be her new husband. She looked healthier, the haunted expression replaced by something like peace. "Diana, I didn't expect, we're moving to Santa Fe, fresh start." She gestured to her companion. "This is Tom. I wanted him to meet the man who stopped Craig, who made it possible for me to move forward." They talked briefly about healing, about the strange fellowship of those Craig had targeted. Diana had started a support group for financial fraud victims. 3 of Craig's other marks had joined, finding comfort in shared experience. "Funny how the worst things sometimes lead to the best things," she mused, watching Tom help a child reach a high chile. "I never would have met him if Craig hadn't destroyed my first life." After they left, Anya found him sitting in the shade, processing the encounter. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just thinking about paths. How one person's cruelty can ripple out, but so can one person's courage. Diana found love because I found my voice. These families have work because Sophia tried to steal the farm. Strange how it all connects. The Buddhists would call it karma. Scientists might say it's chaos theory. I think it's just life, messier and more beautiful than we expect." That evening, after the crowds had gone and the farm settled into twilight quiet, they sat on the portal with cold beers and tired satisfaction. The first harvest had exceeded projections. Orders were already coming in for next season. The sustainable agriculture grant Miguel had mentioned was approved, funding expansion of the educational programs. "I have something to tell you," Anya said, not quite meeting his eyes. His stomach-clenched old reflexes died hard. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. That's what scares me." She took a breath. "My lease is up next month. My landlord wants to sell. I need to find a new place, and I keep thinking." She stopped, started again. "This is going to sound presumptuous. Try me. I keep thinking about that empty room you use for storage, how it gets morning light, how there's space for my desk and maybe some bookshelves. How I'm here most evenings anyway." She finally looked at him. "How maybe it's time to stop pretending we're not already building a life together." He set down his beer, turned to face her fully. "Are you asking to move in?" "I'm asking if you'd consider it. No pressure. We can find me another place if, yes." "Yes? Yes. Move in. Bring your books and your plants and your terrible taste in movies. Wake up here every morning. Make this we official." Her smile bloomed like the desert after rain. "Really?" "Really. Though fair warning, I snore. And I get up ridiculously early. And I'm set in my ways about how to load the dishwasher." I talk to my plants. Sometimes I read poetry to them, and I reorganize everything compulsively when I'm stressed. Sounds perfect. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted of promise and cold beer and the simple joy of finding love when you'd stopped looking for it. Inside the house, he could already imagine her touches plants in the windows, books overflowing the shelves, her reading glasses on his nightstand. "I love you," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to, didn't expect to at this point in my life, but I do. I love you too, differently than before. Better maybe, based on who we actually are instead of who we pretend to be. That's the only kind worth having." Later, as they made plans for moving her things, discussing which furniture to keep and what to donate, he marveled at the ordinariness of it. No drama, no passion that burned everything in its path. Just two people choosing to intertwine their lives like root systems, each making the other stronger. His phone buzzed a text from the veterans group. They'd sold every piece at the Harvest Festival, wanted to commission more for the holiday craft fair. He showed it to Anya, who immediately began planning which wood would work best for serving platters. "We'll need to clear out that storage room soon," she mused. "Maybe turn it into a proper workshop for you." "We," he repeated, liking the word more each time. "I could get used to that." Outside, the fields rustled in the evening breeze, heavy with the promise of continued harvest. The Redemption Reserve had lived up to its name, not just redeeming the land from those who would have exploited it, but redeeming his faith in the future. Tomorrow, they'd start moving Anya's life into his. Next week, they'd host their first dinner party as an official couple. Next month, who knew? The beauty was in not needing to know, in trusting that whatever came would be faced together. The roots were deep now, the shoots were strong, and the harvest of chilies, of community, of unexpected love promised to sustain them for seasons to come. November arrived with unexpected frost, winter staking its claim early. He stood in the doorway of Presbyterian Hospital, a place he'd managed to avoid since Sophia's arrest. But Patricia's call had been desperate, and even justified anger had its limits. "She's in room 314, Patricia said, meeting him in the lobby. 2 years of working double shifts had aged her, but there was something clearer in her eyes, the look of someone who'd faced their demons and survived. "The doctors say it's stress-related, maybe an ulcer that perforated. She's been living rough since she got out." "When was she released?" 3 months ago. Good behavior. Overcrowding. She didn't tell anyone. Too proud or too ashamed, I don't know which." Patricia fidgeted with her badge. "I shouldn't ask, but I'll see her. Once. That's all." The woman in the hospital bed looked ancient. Sophia had lost more weight, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut. The designer clothes were long gone, replaced by a thin hospital gown that made her look vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. Her eyes opened as he approached, widening with surprise that shifted quickly to shame. "You came." "Patricia called, said you were alone. I'm always alone now. No self-pity in it, just fact. Funny how that works. Throw away everyone who actually cares and you end up with exactly what you deserve." He sat in the visitor's chair studying this stranger who'd shared his bed for 40 years. "Where have you been living?" "Weekly motel on Central. Cleaning rooms for cash. Ironic, right? The gallery queen scrubbing toilets." She tried to laugh, winced at the pain. "I saw the article about your wedding. You and Anya looked happy." The wedding had been small, just family and close friends at the farm. Evelyn officiating with an online ordination. Anya in a simple sundress, him in jeans and his good boots, exchanging vows among the chile plants as the sun set, perfect in its simplicity. "We are happy." "Good. That's good." She closed her eyes. "I dream about the farm sometimes. Wake up thinking I'm still there, that none of this happened. Then I remember what I did, and the motel room feels like more than I deserve." "What do you want, Sophia?" "Nothing. Everything. To apologize again, though I know it changes nothing. To tell you that seeing you happy doesn't hurt the way I expected. It's almost a relief knowing I didn't destroy your capacity for love." "You tried." "I tried," she agreed. "But you were stronger than my weakness. Thank God for that." A nurse came in to check vitals, giving him an excuse to stand, to create distance. Sophia watched him move away with eyes that expected nothing. "Craig wrote me," she said suddenly. "From prison. Wanted to know if I had any money hidden away. When I said no, he sent back a letter calling me a worthless mark who'd outlived her usefulness. I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was educational. Seeing myself through his eyes, just another fool who fell for the charm. At least you loved who you thought I was. He never saw me as anything but a wallet with benefits." The conversation was veering into territory that felt too much like forgiveness, and he wasn't ready for that. Might never be. "Patricia says you need somewhere to go when they release you." "I'll figure it out. I always do now. There's a women's shelter in the South Valley. They help with job placement, counseling. I've written a check to cover 3 months' residence." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why would you?" "Because hating you takes energy I'd rather spend on living. Because Anya believes in kindness and she's made me believe in it too. Because 40 years should count for something, even if it ends badly. I don't deserve." "No, you don't. But that's not the point anymore." He left the check on her bedside table and walked out without looking back. In the parking lot, he sat in his truck for a long moment, letting the emotions settle. Not forgiveness, that was too large a word for what he felt, but a kind of release, maybe. The last chain connecting him to old pain, finally cut. At home, Anya was in the kitchen they'd reorganized together, making green chile stew from his mother's recipe. She looked up at his entrance, reading his face with the intuition that still surprised him. How was it? Hard, necessary, done. She ladled stew into bowls while he told her about the visit, about Sophia's condition and the shelter check. Anya listened without judgment, one of her many gifts. "You did a good thing," she said finally. "I did a practical thing. She's got Patricia, but Patricia can barely support herself. This way, Sophia has a chance to rebuild something, or not. Either way, it's no longer my problem." And Craig still has 5 years left. Still writing letters trying to find new marks, apparently. Some people never learn. They ate in comfortable silence, the kitchen warm with steam and spice. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, dusting the fields in white. The farm would sleep through winter, gathering strength for spring's explosion of growth. "I've been thinking," Anya said, "about the youth program. What if we expanded it? Created internships for kids aging out of foster care? Teach them farming, but also life skills, financial literacy. Give them what no one gave them, a fair chance. Using the farm as more than a farm." Exactly. Miguel's nephew ages out next year. He's smart, hard-working, but has nowhere to go. We have the bunkhouse just sitting empty. He noted, smiling. "I like your idea. Let's talk to Seth about the legal structure, maybe set up a non-profit arm." "Really?" "Really. The farm saved me when I needed saving. Maybe it can do the same for others." She kissed him then, tasting of green chile and promise. 2 years since Chile Fest, and he'd built a life he couldn't have imagined in those first dark days. A wife who partnered rather than performed, a farm that nourished community as well as soil. Purpose beyond profit. "Patricia called while you were gone," Anya mentioned. "Wanted to thank you for helping Sophia. Also wanted to know if we'd consider hiring her for the youth program. She's good with troubled kids, has the medical training for emergencies. What do you think?" "I think redemption should be available to everyone who genuinely seeks it. But it's your call. She's your former sister-in-law." He thought about Patricia, the weakness that had made her betray him, the strength it had taken to testify and rebuild. People were complicated, capable of both cruelty and kindness, sometimes in the same heart. "Let's interview her. See if she's really changed or just desperate. If it's real, maybe there's a place for her here." "You're a good man, you know that?" "I'm a practical man who learned the hard way that holding onto poison only hurts the person holding it. Besides," he added, pulling her close, "you make me want to be better than I am. We make each other better. That's how it's supposed to work." The snow fell harder, blanketing the world in fresh white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, finalizing the youth program, preparing for the holiday craft fair, navigating the complex dance of extended family at Thanksgiving. But tonight, in the warmth of their kitchen, with good food and better company, life felt full in ways that had nothing to do with money or status. His phone buzzed a text from Diana Morrison. Craig had been caught running a con from prison, trying to defraud a pen pal. His sentence had been extended. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Good news? Anya asked, noting his expression. Just the universe balancing its books. Craig won't be bothering anyone for a long while. And Sophia? We'll either find her way or won't. But that story's no longer mine to write. He pulled Anya closer, watching the snow transform their world into something clean and new. The circle was closing not with revenge or bitterness, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt on truth. Tomorrow's challenges would come, but they'd face them together, rooted in soil that had been tested by fire and proven fertile. The storm outside was just weather. The storm within had finally passed. 5 years. That's how long it had been since he'd stood on a stage at Chillafest, burning his old life to the ground. Now he stood in the same convention center, but everything had changed. The Redemption Reserve Youth Agricultural Program banner hung where corporate sponsors once preened. Instead of society gossips, the room filled with young faces, foster kids, at-risk youth, graduates of their program who'd found direction in the soil. "You ready for this, Jefe?" Miguel asked, adjusting his own tie with the discomfort of a man more at home in work clothes. "As ready as anyone can be for public speaking." "You'll be fine," Anya assured him, straightening his collar with practiced hands. "Just tell them the truth. It's what you do best." The truth. 5 years ago, he'd weaponized it. Now he offered it as a gift to the 12 young people who'd lived in the bunkhouse, learned the land, and emerged with skills and hope. To the community that had rallied around the farm's transformation, to himself, finally at peace with his story. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer began, "please welcome the founder of Redemption Reserve and this year's recipient of the Governor's Award for Agricultural Innovation." He walked to the podium without the bitter determination of 5 years past. The audience applauded genuine appreciation rather than society obligation. In the front row sat their first graduates. Marcus, who now managed an organic farm in Taos. Elena, studying sustainable agriculture at NMSU. James, who'd started his own landscaping business with a microloan from their program. "5 years ago, I stood on this stage and destroyed something," he began. "Today, I want to talk about what grew from those ashes." He spoke about transformation of land, of lives, of his own heart, about Anya's partnership that had turned a bitter joke into a thriving nonprofit, about Miguel's patience with troubled teens who reminded him of his own difficult youth, about Patricia's work as program counselor, her own redemption earned through service to others. "We call it Redemption Reserve because everyone deserves a second chance. The kids who come to us have been told they're worthless, unwanted, destined to fail. We show them that's a lie, that with good soil, careful tending, and patient faith, anything can grow." In the audience, he spotted unexpected faces. Diana Morrison, now on their board of directors. Seth Navarro, who'd helped structure the nonprofit pro bono. Even Ben, Craig's former accountant who'd donated his accounting services as continued penance. "But here's what I've learned," he continued. "Redemption isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. Every morning we choose whether to water our bitterness or our better angels, whether to spread poison or fertilizer, whether to build walls or plant gardens that feed others." He talked about the youth who'd found family in the fields, the sustainable farming practices now copied across the state, the ripple effects of choosing creation over destruction. As he spoke, his eyes found Anya's, drawing strength from her steady presence. "Someone once told me that everything has a price. They were wrong. The most valuable things, trust, community, the chance to make amends, these can't be bought or sold. They can only be cultivated, one careful day at a time." The speech ended to thunderous applause. Young hands reached out as he returned to his seat. Kids who'd learned that discipline and care could coax life from the desert, who'd discovered their own worth in the rhythm of seasons. Afterward, at the reception their graduates had insisted on catering, Patricia approached hesitantly. 3 years clean, 2 years working with their kids, she'd earned her place but still moved carefully around him. "That was beautiful," she said. "Sophia would have—" She stopped, shook her head. "Sorry, I shouldn't." "How is she?" Patricia looked surprised. They'd had an unspoken agreement not to discuss her sister, who'd left the shelter after 6 months and disappeared into whatever life she'd built. She's okay, living in Oregon, working at a nursery if you can believe it. She sent a donation to the program last month. Anonymous, but I recognized her handwriting. Good for her. She asked me to tell you something if I ever got the chance. She said the farm was always yours, never hers, that she was just a guest who overstayed her welcome, and that she's glad it's being used to help kids who need it more than she ever did. He processed this unexpected coda, then nodded. Tell her the donation is appreciated, and that I hope she's found peace. I will. The evening wound on supporters mingling with graduates, plans being made for expansion, hope threading through conversations like chile ristras strung for drying. Evelyn held court near the dessert table, regaling donors with stories of the program's early days. Miguel's nephew, now their junior farm manager, explained organic certification to interested farmers. It's something, isn't it? Anya said, slipping her hand into his. What you've built from all that pain. What we've built. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You would have found a way. But I'm glad I got to be part of it. They stayed until the last graduate headed home, the convention center staff beginning to stack chairs. The same space that had witnessed his greatest humiliation now held the warmth of community, of lives changed, of bitter seeds transformed into sustaining harvest. Outside, the December air was crisp with promise. They drove home through familiar streets, past the gallery that now housed a community arts center, past the motel where Sophia had hit bottom, past all the landmarks of a life that had shattered and reformed. The farm waited in peaceful darkness, lit only by stars and the soft glow from the bunkhouse where 3 new residents were settling and kids who'd arrived angry and suspicious, who'd leave with skills and hope and the knowledge that someone believed in their worth. Tired? Anya asked as they pulled into the drive. Good tired, the kind that means something. Inside, their home welcomed them, books and plants mingling on every surface, the comfortable disorder of lives fully lived. He built a fire while Anya made tea, settling into the evening ritual that had replaced 40 years of different patterns. I've been thinking, she said, curling beside him on the couch, about what you said tonight, about daily choices. What about them? I choose you. Every morning when I wake up, every night before I sleep, not from habit or obligation, but from joy. You make me want to be my best self. You are your best self. I'm trying to be. We both are. That's what makes this work. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance. Through the window, the field stretched dark and patient, waiting for spring. The bunkhouse lights went out one by one as kids who'd never had stable homes settled into sleep. His phone buzzed a text from Marcus in Taos, a photo of his first harvest, rows of organic produce ready for market. None of this without you in the reserve. Thank you for believing in throwaway kids. You're crying, Anya observed. Happy tears, the best kind. She kissed his temple, tasting salt and satisfaction. You know what I love most about our life? What's that? It's honest. No pretense, no performance, just real people doing real work that really matters. Speaking of which, he said, I've been thinking about succession planning. We're not getting younger. Maybe it's time to start training Marcus or Elena to take over leadership. Keep the reserve going beyond us. Already planning your retirement? You just won an award. Not retirement, evolution. Maybe we scale back operations, focus on mentoring, travel to those places we always talk about. See the northern lights, visit the agricultural programs in Costa Rica, live a little more, work a little less. I like the sound of that. They made tentative plans next year after the current cohort graduated. Time enough to ensure continuity, to plant seeds that would bloom long after they were gone. The legacy not of wealth or property, but of lives changed and chances offered. You know what the strangest part is? He mused as the fire burned low. I'm grateful for all of it. Even the betrayal. Without it, I'd still be sleepwalking through life. Never would have discovered what I was capable of. Never would have found you. Careful. That sounds dangerously close to forgiveness. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just acceptance that the worst things sometimes till the soil for the best things. That's farming, isn't it? Sometimes you have to burn the field to make it fertile. Very poetic for an engineer. You're rubbing off on me. They banked the fire and headed to bed, moving through the house with the easy synchronization of lives intertwined. In the bedroom, their bedroom, not haunted by other ghosts, they settled into warmth and peace. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "Thank you for taking a chance on a bitter old farmer. Thank you for becoming the man I fell in love with, though you were never as bitter as you thought." No? No. Hurt, yes. Angry, certainly, but never bitter. Bitter people don't build youth programs or forgive sisters-in-law or send ex-wives to shelters. You just needed time to remember who you really were. Outside, coyotes called across the desert, their songs carrying news of territory and season. The farm slept under winter stars, dreaming of spring's awakening. In the bunkhouse, young lives reset their course by degrees, guided by patient hands and persistent faith. He drifted toward sleep, Anya's breathing steady beside him, and thought about the morning 5 years ago when he'd stood in his fields wondering if betrayal would kill him. It hadn't. Instead, it had burned away everything false, leaving room for authentic growth. The fire Sophia had started had consumed her world, not his. He'd used the ashes to fertilize something new. The desert had taught its ultimate lesson, that life persists, that renewal is always possible, that the worst drought eventually yields to rain. Now was the calm after earned storms, the peace of aligned purpose, the warmth of love built on truth rather than illusion. And yes, it did taste sweeter than any revenge. The dawn would come, as it always did, painting the desert in possibility. He'd rise to meet it not alone, not angry, but grateful for the journey that had led him here. The fields would wait, patient as always. The kids would need guidance. Anya would have new ideas for the program. Life would continue its complex dance of challenge and reward. But for now, in the quiet darkness, he held his wife and let contentment settle into his bones like summer rain into thirsty earth. The story that had begun with betrayal had found its way to grace. The man who'd lost everything had discovered what actually mattered. And in the end, that was the greatest harvest of all.